People think they know Jonathan Roumie, the man who plays Jesus, the face that brought millions back to faith, the actor who made the Gospels feel alive again. But there's one moment, one letter he wrote in complete solitude that reveals more about love, faith, and the courage to wait than anything he's ever done on screen. This is the story he never planned to share. Stay till the end, because once you hear what Jonathan revealed in that letter and see how the host completely lost her composure, your idea of love, patience, and God's timing will never be the same. The studio lights were bright that afternoon. Jonathan sat across from the host, expecting the usual questions about The Chosen, about playing Jesus, about the pressure of portraying the most sacred figure in history. But then she leaned forward with genuine curiosity in her eyes and asked something different, something personal, something that would crack open a part of his heart he had protected for years. Do you ever think about marriage, Jonathan? About finding the one? The question hung in the air like a prayer waiting for an answer. He shifted in his seat, and for a moment you could see it. The loneliness behind the fame. The weight of being seen as a spiritual icon while feeling profoundly human. The years of waiting that no one talks about, because everyone assumes a man like him must have it all figured out. His hand moved slowly to his jacket pocket. I actually wrote something once, he said quietly. A letter. The host smiled politely, probably expecting a sweet anecdote. But Jonathan pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges like it had been read 1,000 times in private moments. To my future wife, he began. And what he read next didn't just move the host to tears. It stopped the entire studio cold. Because this wasn't just a letter. It was a confession of faith written in the darkness of waiting. And nobody was ready for what it would reveal. People always assumed the hardest part of Jonathan's life was the fame, the pressure of playing Jesus, the weight of millions watching, judging, expecting him to be more than human, the scrutiny that came with every scene, every interview, every moment in the public eye. But the truth, the real challenge, was something no camera ever captured. It was the waiting, the coming home alone after being surrounded by thousands, the silent apartment that echoed with questions no one else seemed to ask. He exhaled slowly, like releasing years of buried longing. He had learned to hide behind gratitude and faith. I had become good at the role, he admits. Every day felt like a loop. Prayer, filming, interviews, events, smiling for cameras, inspiring strangers, being strong for people who saw me as Jesus while forgetting I was just Jonathan. I wasn't living a full life. I was serving a calling. And the more people celebrated what I did, the more I felt the emptiness of what I didn't have. Someone to share it with. Someone who saw me, not the character. The camera moves in closer. The kind of shot where you can see the weight of years behind the eyes. I didn't talk about it because who do you tell? Who do you admit to that playing the savior of the world makes you feel forgotten as a man? Who do you confess to that you pray for others' marriages while wondering if you'll ever have your own? A faint smile crosses his face, but it's sad, the kind that hides more than it reveals. And then one night, sitting alone in my apartment after another long day on set, I did something I'd never done before. The music drops to a soft, emotional hum. I didn't call anyone. I didn't scroll through distractions. I didn't pray the same prayers I'd prayed 1,000 times before. His voice lowers like he's sharing something sacred. I sat down at my desk, pulled out a piece of paper, and I wrote to her. To a woman I had never met. To a woman I wasn't even sure existed. And in that moment, when everyone thought I had it all together, when the world saw me as the guy who played Jesus, I poured out my heart to someone I could only meet through faith. A pause. A heartbeat. Suspense rises like a breath being held. The letter wasn't romantic in the way movies show it. It wasn't poetic for the sake of beauty. It was raw. It was real. It was a man's soul crying out in the dark, believing God heard him even when no human did. His eyes shift, remembering exactly how his hand trembled as he wrote the first line. And that letter, those words written in complete vulnerability and desperate hope, would become the most honest thing I ever shared. The music tightens. The mystery deepens. I'm not reading it to you yet, because before you understand the words, you have to understand the ache that wrote them. The years of watching everyone else find love while you choose to wait. The faith it takes to believe in someone you can't see. He leans back, breath trembling just slightly. And that night, alone with just God and a blank page, everything began to change. It wasn't a church stage or a faith conference or some religious podcast like you might expect. It was a regular daytime talk show. Studio audience, bright lights, commercial breaks. The kind of place where celebrities come to promote projects, tell funny stories, and leave with polished sound bites for social media. Jonathan wasn't supposed to go deep. The pre-interview had been simple. Talk about The Chosen. Share some behind-the-scenes moments. Maybe discuss the impact of faith-based entertainment. Keep it light. Keep it inspiring. Keep it safe. But something shifted when the cameras started rolling. The host had a warmth about her, the kind that makes people feel seen instead of interviewed. And when she asked about his personal life, about love, about whether a man of such deep faith thought about marriage, Jonathan felt something stir inside him. A prompting, a whisper, a sense that maybe, just maybe, this moment was meant for more than surface conversation. He sat in the guest chair, hands folded, visibly hesitant. The studio buzzed with the usual energy. Cameras positioned, audience waiting, crew checking monitors, production assistants ready to signal time. Nobody expected what was about to happen. So Jonathan, the host, asked with genuine curiosity, a man of faith like you, how do you think about love? About finding the one? It was a standard question, the kind that usually gets a thoughtful but guarded answer. Something about trusting God's timing. Something about focusing on the work. Something safe that protects the private while satisfying the public. But Jonathan paused. Longer than a typical interview pause. Long enough that you could see him deciding something in real time. The room's energy shifted subtly. The host noticed. The audience leaned in slightly, without knowing why. Actually, Jonathan said slowly, his voice quieter than before, I wrote something once. A letter. The host's expression showed polite interest, probably expecting him to reference something he'd written for a film or a character study. But then he clarified, and the atmosphere changed completely. Not to anyone I knew, he continued. To my future wife. To the woman I was praying God was preparing for me. You could feel the shift. Crew members, who had been half paying attention, looked up. Audience members, who were checking phones, stopped. The host's professional smile softened into something more real, more present. Wait, she said, leaning forward. You wrote a letter to someone you'd never met? Jonathan nodded, a small vulnerable movement. Someone I still haven't met. The admission hung in the air, raw and undefended. Here was a man the world watched portray perfect love, perfect faith, perfect sacrifice on screen, confessing that in real life, he was still waiting, still hoping, still believing in someone he couldn't see. The host's eyes widened slightly. Do you still have it? She asked, her voice gentler now. The question wasn't scripted. This wasn't in the show notes. This was two humans connecting over something deeper than entertainment. Jonathan reached slowly into his jacket pocket. The camera caught the movement, the slight tremor in his hand, the worn edges of folded paper as he pulled it out. He held it for a moment, staring at it like it cost him something to share. I've read this to myself more times than I can count, he said quietly. On hard nights, on lonely nights, on nights when I wondered if I was crazy for waiting this long. The host's expression shifted from curiosity to something closer to reverence. The studio felt smaller suddenly, more intimate, like the audience was being allowed into a sacred space they hadn't earned, but were being trusted with anyway. Would you, she began, then paused, choosing her words carefully. Would you read it? To us? Time seemed to stop. Everything hinged on his answer. This wasn't promotion. This wasn't performance. This was a man deciding whether to let strangers into the most tender part of his heart. Jonathan looked down at the letter, then up at the host, then out at the audience, filled with faces he'd never see again. And something in his spirit said yes. Yes, he said simply. The host's hand moved to her chest instinctively, already sensing this would be different. The audience fell into a silence so complete you could hear the air conditioning humming. And Jonathan Roumie, the man who spoke Jesus' words to millions, prepared to read the words he wrote to a woman who existed only in faith and hope and the promises of a God who sees what we cannot. Jonathan's voice changed when he began reading. It wasn't the strong, assured voice of Jesus from the show. It wasn't the polished interview voice of an actor promoting a project. It was quieter, tender, the voice of a man who had written these words alone, never imagining he'd speak them to the world. To the woman I'm waiting for, he read, his eyes focused on the paper like it was a lifeline. I don't know your name yet. I don't know your face. I don't know if you're reading a book right now, or laughing with friends, or struggling through your own season of waiting. But I know you're real. I have to believe you're real, because God wouldn't put this desire in my heart if there wasn't someone He created to walk beside me. The studio was motionless. Every eye fixed on him. He continued, his voice steady but soft. There are nights I wonder if I'm being foolish. The world tells me to stop waiting, to lower my standards, to accept that maybe I'm meant to be alone because the calling on my life is too big for partnership. My friends are married. Some are on their second kid. And I'm still here, praying for someone I've never held. His hand gripped the paper slightly tighter. But then I remember something. I'd rather wait a lifetime for God's best than settle for what makes sense to everyone else. I'd rather be lonely now than be married and still feel alone. You're worth the wait, even if it takes years, even if people think I'm crazy, even if I never understand why it had to take this long. A slight crack in his voice, barely noticeable, but the host caught it, her eyes already glistening. Jonathan paused, collected himself, then kept reading. I want you to know what I'm learning while I wait for you. I'm learning that loneliness isn't punishment. It's preparation. Every night I come home to an empty apartment. I'm learning to be whole on my own, so I don't need you to complete me. I'm learning to find joy in God alone, so that when you come, you'll be a gift, not a solution. I'm learning patience, self-control, how to guard my heart without closing it, how to stay soft in a world that rewards hardness. The camera caught a woman in the audience, wiping her eyes. Then another. I'm learning what it means to love someone I haven't met yet. To pray for your protection when I don't know what you need protecting from. To pray for your growth when I don't know what you're struggling with. To pray that God is doing in you what He's doing in me, making us both ready for a love that's built to last, not just feel good. He looked up briefly, meeting the host's gaze, then back to the letter. I'm scared sometimes. His voice dropped lower, more vulnerable. I'm scared that I've played Jesus so long that people forget I'm just Jonathan. I'm scared you'll see the character instead of the man. I'm scared the fame will complicate everything. I'm scared I'll disappoint you when you realize I'm not holy. I'm just trying. That I don't have all the answers. That some days my faith feels small and my doubts feel loud. The host's hand was fully over her mouth now, tears streaming silently. But here's what I promise you, even before I know who you are. Jonathan's voice strengthened, like he was making a vow. I promise to see you the way God sees you, not as a role to fill, but as a person to know. Not as my wife, but as His daughter that He's trusting me with. I promise to fight for us when things get hard, because they will. Marriage isn't a fairy tale. It's two broken people choosing each other every single day. I promise to pray with you, not just for you. To lead us spiritually, not because I'm perfect, but because I'm desperate for God's guidance. I promise to protect what we build. Our intimacy, emotional and physical, as sacred. Our conversations as safe. Our home is a place where we can both be weak and still be loved. A producer in the corner had stopped watching the clock. This was no longer about runtime. I don't know if I'll be a good husband yet, Jonathan read, his voice trembling now. But I promise I'll spend every day trying to become one. I promise I won't compare you to anyone. I won't hold you to impossible standards. I won't punish you for the ways other people have hurt me. The studio felt like a sanctuary, like everyone present was witnessing something they weren't supposed to see, but couldn't look away from. And right now, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I'm praying for you. He paused, emotion thick in his throat. I'm praying God is holding your heart gently, healing what's broken, growing what needs to grow, teaching you things I can't, preparing you for a partnership I'm still learning how to offer. The silence was holy. Jonathan looked up from the letter, his eyes meeting the camera for just a moment. And I'm praying that when we finally meet, we'll both know. We'll both be ready. will both understand why it had to take this long. But he wasn't finished. The host could barely breathe, because what came next, what Jonathan was about to read, would break something open in that studio that couldn't be put back together. Jonathan's hand steadied as he found his place on the page again. What he was about to read had never been spoken out loud to anyone. These were the words he'd returned to on the hardest nights, the promises he'd made in secret that kept him anchored when everything else felt uncertain. "I want you to know something," he continued, voice stronger now, like he was drawing courage from the honesty itself. "When I finally see you, when I watch you walk toward me on our wedding day, I'll know that every year of waiting wasn't wasted. Every lonely night was a refining fire. Every moment I chose patience over compromise was building something that can't be shaken. Our marriage won't be perfect, but it will be purposeful. It won't always be easy, but it will be faithful." The host's tears were falling freely now, no longer trying to hide them. "I dream about the life we'll build together," Jonathan read, his voice softening with tenderness. "Not an Instagram perfect life, but a real one. I dream about praying with you on mornings when we're both exhausted, laughing with you when we fail at something we thought we'd figured out, serving others with you when God blesses us with success. I dream about building a home that honors God and welcomes broken people, a place where hurting friends feel safe, where truth is spoken in love, where the gospel isn't just preached, but lived in how we treat each other." He paused, swallowing hard. "And if God gives us children, I pray we raise them to see marriage as covenant, not convenience, to see love as sacrifice, not just feeling, to see that the wait for God's best is always worth it." A sound came from the audience, someone crying audibly. Then another. The camera operators stood frozen, forgetting to adjust their angles. "But here's what I need you to hear most." Jonathan's voice cracked slightly, the emotion finally breaking through. "You are worth the wait, even if it takes 40 years, even if everyone thinks I'm foolish, even if I'm gray-haired and tired when we finally meet. Because settling for less than what God has for us would be betraying both of our stories. It would be saying I don't trust him. And I do. Even when it's hard. Even when I don't understand. Even when I'm so lonely I can barely breathe. I trust him with you. With me. With us." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Until we meet, I'm praying for you. I'm becoming for you. I'm waiting for you. With faith that doesn't always feel strong. With hope that sometimes feels foolish. With love that already exists for someone I've yet to hold." The paper shook slightly in his hands as he read the final line. "Yours in Christ, even before I'm yours in marriage. Jonathan." And then the date. Written years ago when he was younger, less known, more alone than anyone realized. He folded the letter carefully, the worn creases falling into place like they had 1,000 times before. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, heavy with emotion and holy things that don't fit into words. The host opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She pressed her fingers to her lips, shoulders shaking with sobs she couldn't contain. She tried again. She started, voice breaking completely. I can't." The audience was standing now, some clapping through tears, others just crying, hands over their hearts. Finally, the host managed to speak through her tears. "That is the most beautiful thing I have ever heard in 20 years of doing this show." She wiped her face with both hands, mascara smudged, not caring at all about how she looked. "Jonathan, do you?" Her voice cracked again. "Do you still believe everything you just read?" "Every single word," he said quietly, eyes glistening now too. "Maybe even more now than when I wrote it." The host completely broke then. Full sobs. She looked at the camera, then back at Jonathan. "She's out there," she said fiercely through her tears. "I don't know who she is, but she is the most blessed woman on this earth, and she doesn't even know it yet." Jonathan's gentle smile was sad and hopeful at the same time. "I'll be the blessed one," he said softly. "She'll be the answer to years of prayers I thought God wasn't hearing." The host couldn't continue. She waved helplessly toward the camera, toward the control booth. She gasped, "we need to take a break." "I can't, I'm sorry." But nobody moved, because what had just happened wasn't an interview anymore. It was a testimony. A confession. A man's heart offered up with trembling hands to a world that had forgotten what it looks like to wait with faith. And in that moment, every person in that studio and everyone who would later watch this moment knew they had witnessed something rare. Not celebrity, not performance, but pure, aching, beautiful truth. He didn't write that letter to share it with millions. He wrote it to survive the loneliness, to give voice to the ache that had no other outlet, to anchor himself to truth when feelings tried to convince him he was being foolish. But that letter became more than words on paper. It became a standard he couldn't ignore, a mirror he had to face every single day. I realized something after I wrote it. Jonathan reflects quietly, eyes distant like he's watching his own story unfold from the outside. I couldn't just write those promises and live carelessly. Every choice I made, every relationship I walked away from, every night I chose to go home alone instead of filling the emptiness with something temporary, I had to ask myself, is this what I'd want her to know about this season of my life? The letter changed how he saw purity, not as outdated rules or religious restriction, but as protection, as honor for a woman he'd never met, but already loved. He stopped dating just to date, stopped entertaining connections that felt good, but weren't going anywhere. Every person who showed interest, he measured against the promises he'd written, and most didn't align, not because they weren't good people, but because good enough isn't what he'd asked God for. It changed his purpose too. The waiting stopped being passive, stopped being something he endured, and became something he engaged. I wasn't just waiting for her, he says, voice steady with conviction. I was becoming for her. Every character I chose to play, every habit I worked to break, every counseling session I sat through to heal my own wounds, every morning I got up early to pray when I didn't feel like it. All of it was preparation. All of it mattered. People around him noticed the shift. The restlessness that used to follow him like a shadow began to lift. The sadness in his eyes when friends announced engagements turned into genuine joy. He stopped asking God when and started asking God why. Why this long? Why this path? Why this particular refining? And slowly, painfully, the answer started coming. Not in audible voices, but in realizations that hit like lightning. The wait wasn't about finding the right person. It was about becoming the right person. God wasn't withholding. He was protecting. Every year Jonathan thought was wasted was actually investment. Not in a relationship that didn't exist yet, but in a man who was being made ready for a love that would require everything he was learning. He glances down, almost embarrassed by how completely that letter rewired his life. I spent years begging God to bring her, he admits. And he kept saying, not yet. Not because she wasn't ready, because I wasn't. The letter didn't save him, but it reminded him daily what he was saving himself for. And that made all the difference. He stopped being a man desperate for marriage and became a man prepared for covenant. Not perfect, not without lonely nights and moments of doubt, but anchored, rooted, willing to wait as long as it took, because he tasted what it meant to trust God with the deepest desire of his heart. And that changed absolutely everything. The interview clip went viral within hours. Not because of marketing, not because of algorithms, because it was raw, because it was real, because millions of people had never heard a man talk about love, faith, and waiting like that. The comments flooded in. Women weeping, saying they didn't know men like this still existed. Men convicted, asking why they'd settled for less when they could have waited for God's best. Young people screenshot his words, turning them into wallpapers, into journal entries, into prayers of their own. But Jonathan's response to all of it remained humble. He didn't do press tours about the letter. He didn't write a book capitalizing on the moment. He simply said, I'm not special. I'm just a man who decided that waiting with faith was better than settling in fear. And I still don't have all the answers. Some nights I still wonder if I heard God wrong. If I should have compromised years ago, if she's even real. But then he pauses, and his voice carries the weight of hard-won conviction. And then I remember that God's promises don't have expiration dates. His timing is perfect even when it feels cruel. My job isn't to understand. It's to trust. The letter wasn't about perfect words. It was about a faithful heart that refused to give up on what God whispered in the quiet. Maybe you're waiting for something too. Not just marriage, Maybe a calling that hasn't opened yet, a promise that feels delayed, a dream that everyone says you should abandon. Maybe you're tempted to settle because the wait feels unbearable. But what if your waiting isn't wasted? What if it's the very thing that makes the blessing sustainable when it finally arrives? What if God is doing something in the delay that wouldn't happen any other way? If this story reminded you that faith-filled waiting has purpose, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear that their wait matters, that their faithfulness in the lonely seasons isn't going unnoticed, that the story isn't over yet. Thank you for watching. And remember this, one letter written in faith can echo into eternity. One decision to wait, well, can change everything. The wait is hard. The doubt is real. The loneliness cuts deep. But the reward of God's best is worth every single night you chose patience over compromise. Worth every tear. Worth every question. Worth it all.